Okay guys, so after 5 long years, I finally managed to pick myself up an RTX 3060 Ti. I've actually been using this graphics card now for a couple of weeks here in the studio, and I'm starting to regret not picking one up earlier, to be honest, because this thing is absolutely awesome. I also think that this is now becoming the starting point for anybody out there that's wanting to get into PC gaming and maybe on a budget. And to show you what I actually mean about that, let's dive into it a little bit deeper. Now, the RTX 3060 Ti was released by Nvidia as an entry-level graphics card as part of their 30 series range. For anybody that remembers the 30 series release, you will remember that it was at a time when we thought that Nvidia were completely resetting the game. They were going to provide some fantastic cards that look great, perform great, and they had some pretty decent prices. The 3060 Ti in particular was great price to performance, the 3070 was okay, and the 3080 was absolutely amazing. But then, of course, the mining boom hit and nobody could actually find these cards or even pick them up. If you could manage to find an RTX card or even an FE model like this one, it was going to cost you an arm and a leg, and many people actually went into raffles just to be able to get the chance to smell one. So it wasn't the greatest of times, but over time they did start to become more available and they become extremely popular too. The 3060 Ti in particular was extremely popular, at one stage hitting the top of the Steam hardware survey. It didn't last as long as obviously its predecessors like the GTX 1060. It was quickly overtaken by the normal 3060 as well as the 4060 after that one, but it was there, which means that it was extremely popular, particularly with budget gamers. The one that I've got here today, or at least the one I managed to pick up, is of course the Founders Edition model. I do love Nvidia's Founders Edition cards. I think it looks absolutely amazing. We've got a twin fan configuration on the front. We have a pass-through ventilation on the back. And I just think it's beautiful the way they've wrapped these cards around the side so you can't see any kind of heat pipes and things like that. They do look very flashy, very professional and very modern, although the one thing that is a little bit of a put off on these cards is the power connection itself. It does use Nvidia's weird looking little thing here, but they do provide an adapter for that. It's just a little bit ugly in your system. But apart from that, if you can kind of get past that, or if you have a power supply that has a direct connection like this, it can actually look pretty decent in a system. They also look amazing when they're vertically mounted, so you're going to kind of see the front of the card there, and they offer all of the ports and everything that you need. I opted for a Founders Edition card because I absolutely love them, and I think they just look amazing as well. Aside from their amazing looks, they have some pretty decent specs inside, particularly for the tier of card they are. The 3060 Ti in particular sits on the Ampere architecture. It has a base clock speed of 1410 MHz, a boost clock speed of 1665 MHz, it has 4864 shaders, 8 GB of GDDR6 RAM, which is probably its biggest downfall now, but it does have a memory bus of 256 bits. That's quite a large amount considering what modern entry-level cards come with nowadays. It also has a PCI Gen 4x16 interface, and it only uses around 200 watts. It had a release price of around $399, and it was originally released in 2020, which makes it 5 years old. Even on paper, this offered a substantial increase over the previous generation, the 2060, the 2060 Super. So for anybody out there that was purchasing at a 60 class level, this would have offered a great upgrade for you if you could actually find one. But we are now 5 years down the line, it's 2025, so how well does it still perform today when we pit it against some modern games? Well, to find that out, I've been doing a lot of testing on that card, and the first thing we're going to take a look at is our standard preset testing. The preset testing is a number of games from our test suite, running the card at 1080p, 1440p and 4K with a high preset. So let's take a look at those benchmarks, and then we'll discuss what you need to kind of tweak on these to really get the best out of them. So as you can see from those benchmarks, the RTX 3060 Ti offers a fantastic gaming experience at 1080p. On all of the games that we tested, you could get a 60 FPS or above experience, which means that it's absolutely fantastic for those on a budget that are happy at playing at 1080p. 4K, not such a good story there. Pretty much every single game that we tested really did suffer in 4K, which goes to show that this graphics card and its lack of VRAM as such nowadays really isn't cutting it for that kind of resolution. Even with help from upscalers, it still really struggles. But 1440p was actually quite interesting because most of the games that we tested, you could still get a 60 FPS experience and it was perfectly fine. There were only 4 games that we couldn't actually get that kind of performance out of it, and they were super modern, but it didn't take a lot to really boost those games above that kind of level. The first game was Doom: The Dark Ages, a new game to our test suite, and when running the game in 1440p with a high preset, unfortunately you could only manage to kind of achieve around 40 frames per second with a 1% low of 34. Simply dropping the game though down to a medium preset while enabling DLSS with a quality setting, you could instantly boost the game to around 64 frames per second with a 1% low of 53. That made the game completely smooth. It still looked absolutely fantastic because DLSS is really good. So that was definitely a win for the RTX 3060 here. The next game was Horizon Forbidden West. Now, it's not one of the latest titles in our test suite, but it does actually struggle quite a bit when it's in the higher resolutions. We nearly made a 60 FPS experience here with the standard preset, getting around 55 frames per second with a 1% low of 48. So it really didn't take a lot to boost it up to 60. Keeping the game in 1440p with a high preset and just enabling DLSS with a quality setting, you can actually now achieve around 80 frames per second with a 1% low of 64. Again, just like Doom: The Dark Ages, the game still looks fantastic because it's got a high preset, and because DLSS is so good, you can't really tell a difference when you're playing the game, so that extra little boost there is more than enough. Spider-Man 2 is another new game that we've added to our test suite, and another game where the RTX 3060 Ti struggles to hit that 60 FPS in 1440p with a high preset. We could only manage to achieve around 56 frames per second with a 1% low of 31. Now, the average FPS here isn't the major problem, it's the 1% lows which were really causing us some little tiny micro stutters while playing, but again, it's very easy to kind of cure this. All you need to do is set the game to 1440p with a medium preset and enabling DLSS with a quality setting again, and you can achieve around 79 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 41. Now, that's not the greatest increase there on those 1% lows, but boosting it above 40 actually made the game a lot more smoother. It was kind of like a console experience, if we can put it that way, but it was more than playable, so that is definitely another win for the RTX 3060 Ti. The last game in our test suite which couldn't achieve a 60 FPS average with the RTX 3060 Ti in a high standard preset was of course Black Myth Wukong. Now, this is again another new game to our test suite, so it is a very modern title and it's extremely demanding too. In 1080p with a high preset we could only just stretch to 60 FPS, but with a 1440p resolution we're looking at an average of around 41 frames per second with a 1% low of 33. Now, that game is actually playable with that kind of configuration and that performance, but you could do a little bit better by simply leaving the game in 1440p, dropping the preset to a medium, and again enabling DLSS with a quality setting. With this configuration now you can get an average of around 90 frames per second with a 1% low of 64. Now, that game looks so good in regardless with whichever preset that you set, so a medium preset doesn't really affect it too much, and DLSS again is so good that you can't really tell a difference. So another win for the RTX 3060 Ti there, and it's definitely now starting to look like a pretty decent card for 1440p gaming. So as a 1080p graphics card, the RTX 3060 Ti is absolutely amazing. You can pretty much play any game that you want and get a very decent, if not high FPS experience. 1440p is a little bit touch and go for the older games that are still modern. You can definitely get there. For the latest titles, you will need to use a couple of tools, tweak a few things down, but that's perfectly acceptable. Most brand new release games look fantastic even in a low setting, so even if you have to go down to a low setting, it's still going to be a great gaming experience. But for most of them, just enable something like DLSS. DLSS is absolutely amazing. I couldn't tell a difference in terms of picture quality, frame time, latency, anything like that from switching it on to off. The only difference really was the performance increased, so that is another win for the RTX 3060 Ti and definitely a very good selling point for one too. But of course, this is an RTX card. That means we should be able to do ray tracing, right? Well, actually, yes, you still can. So we tested a bunch of games with ray tracing enabled, and some games where it's enabled as a mandatory thing, so you have to actually use it. And this card still performed exceptionally well. We got some pretty decent performance there. So let's take a look at some of them as well. Now, the first game in our ray tracing testing was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And the reason for this is because we couldn't include it in our normal testing. The limited amount of VRAM on the 3060 Ti being only 8GB means that you just simply cannot play the game in a high preset. It doesn't matter what else you set, whether it's 1080p, 1440p, the game simply cannot allocate enough VRAM to be able to get that running. So you do need to drop the game down to a medium setting. And with a medium setting in 1080p, you can get a pretty decent performance of around 74 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 58. That does mean the game is completely playable, and because it is a hardware ray tracing game, which means ray tracing is always enabled, it still looks absolutely amazing. So again, you can play ray traced typed games on an RTX 3060 Ti, but that's not it. With Cyberpunk 2077, which many people call the ray tracing demo, running the game in 1080p with a ray tracing ultra setting and enabling DLSS with a quality setting, you can still get an average of around 66 frames per second with a 1% low of 46. The game is completely beautiful with that kind of configuration. You're going to get all of the ray tracing effects and a pretty decent performance too. It means the game is exceptionally playable. Dying Light 2 is another game where you can actually turn on full ray tracing, and again running the game in 1080p with a ray tracing high setting while enabling DLSS with a quality setting, you'll manage to get an average of around 85 frames per second with a 1% low of 64. That is actually a near high FPS experience there, even though we are just in a 1080p resolution, but the game looks absolutely fantastic, particularly at night. The lighting effects in this game are amazing when you enable ray tracing, and it's really good that the RTX 3060 Ti can pull this one off. Metro Exodus is another game that feels a bit like a ray tracing demo. It looks absolutely fantastic with or without ray tracing enabled, but when you do enable ray tracing, things become a little bit clearer, particularly in reflections and the light and stuff like that. Running the game in 1080p with a high setting while enabling ray tracing, you don't need any type of DLSS here to get a high FPS experience. The RTX 3060 Ti will easily achieve an average of 121 frames per second with a 1% low of 73. Again, another amazing result here for the little baby RTX card, and something that really shows you that it can get the job done. The last game in our testing was A Plague Tale Requiem, and now this game doesn't offer a full ray tracing capability. It does only offer ray trace shadows, but in fact in some of the levels, when you actually enable it, it makes all the difference in terms of the environment. Running the game in 1080p with a high preset while enabling ray trace shadows and using a DLSS with a balanced setting, you can easily achieve around 101 frames per second with an average of 62. That does make the game, again, completely playable, and definitely something that you'd want to do if you had a graphics card like this, because it really just enhanced the game. Now, of course, our ray tracing testing there was all done at 1080p. You have absolutely no chance in higher resolutions with this graphics card, particularly when enabling ray tracing, because enabling ray tracing actually increases the amount of VRAM that the system needs to use. And the RTX 3060 Ti only comes with 8GB. 8GB now is classed as probably sub the minimum. Lots of people won't even touch an 8GB card. Many budget gamers out there would actually say the opposite. They would say 8GB is the minimum. As long as you like to tweak settings and tune things and use things like DLSS, go to the lower resolutions. And I think today's testing is actually proving that that's quite right. So this is our look at the RTX 3060 Ti. I absolutely love this graphics card. I've not really used many Nvidia graphics cards over time, just purely because of the pricing, but this one came up at the amazing price of only £200. I didn't even have to kind of bid for that. I bought this one off eBay as a buy now. You just go on there and you can find them for less than £200 now. So they're around £190 to £200 you can pick these up for. There are still those out there that seem to slap £250 on them, which is a little bit ridiculous. But for £200, I think this makes a fantastic budget graphics card that lots of gamers out there should probably go and pick up. I wouldn't spend any more than $200 on it purely because of the 8GB of VRAM, but for those of you on a super tight budget or wanting to build an average budget gaming PC, this will absolutely get the job done. But that's our look at the RTX 3060 Ti. I absolutely love it. I hope you guys love it too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content. And also let me know in the comments below, do you have an RTX 3060 Ti? Are you still using it? What kind of games are you playing and what kind of settings are you using? Where have you found that this card struggles the most? Maybe we'll do some more testing with it and test out some of your kind of configurations and things. And I'm sure, as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.